25th Amendment, passed by Congress July 6, 1965, ratified February 10th, 1967. In case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. This is a change from the acting as president we had had up to this point. This is just making it official. The vice president becomes president. I will say I don't actually think it's surprising that LBJ got this one passed. LBJ was a complicated man. I say that every time he comes up because he was a complicated man. But one of the things that he had was a need to feel in control of things. He had been vice president and became president, and he needed to make it very, very clear he became president. He wasn't just acting as president. He fully wanted to run for a second full term, and the only reason he didn't was he didn't want to lose. It was better to not run and not lose.
Yeah, he could have technically, because he only like one year of
a year and change of Kennedy's, because Kennedy was assassinated in 1963 in November. So technically, and Johnson considered running, and in fact did run for a second full term in 1968. And dropped out of the race because he knew he wasn't going to win. He was losing primaries right and left. He could have lost the nomination if things had gone differently to Bobby Kennedy, and that would have gutted him because he hated Bobby Kennedy. So he dropped out before Bobby was assassinated because it was better than losing to him.
Yeah. Whose son is now might be the.
I really believe Mitch McConnell's going to go as far as he can to prevent someone who wants to eliminate the polio vaccine from having the authority to do that. But we'll see how it happens.
How foul is this? The one who father's almost president, and now he's.
Yeah. Health and Human Services, it looks like he wants, but Mitch McConnell had polio as a child, and his sister had severe effects from polio as a child, and Mitch McConnell has strong feelings about the polio vaccine.
One good thing about it, I guess that's one good thing about him.
Yes, the only good thing I know about Mitch McConnell is that he really passionately cares about vaccination. So this officially meant that LBJ became president when Kennedy died, as far as he was concerned. Whenever there is a vacancy in the office of the vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall take office upon confirmation by a majority vote of both houses of Congress. Because in the past, when a vice president took over as president, which, let's be clear, he was always actually sworn in as president, and everyone counted him when they were counting presidents. It just wasn't official until this amendment. But up until that point, we had finished out that term with no vice president. And I don't know what they did in the case of ties in the Senate. I guess it just never came up.
So is this the thing that made Ford possible?
This is the thing that made Ford possible. When Spiro Agnew resigned over tax evasion issues in Maryland, Nixon appointed Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford, I believe, remains the only person who has become vice president in this situation.
So this part is how he became vice president, and the next part became how he became president. So he has to combine two of these things. Sections.
He is the only man in history to hold the office of president without having been elected by the general population into the presidency or vice presidency. And because he only served one term, he took over when Nixon resigned in August 74, and ran in 76 and lost to Jimmy Carter. So Gerald Ford was never elected to the presidency or vice presidency. He is an accident of the 25th Amendment. Whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. And this one has come up once or twice. So this kind of goes back to Woodrow Wilson. And in the 60s, we were really starting to think about how Woodrow Wilson had acted after he had his stroke. Because Woodrow Wilson, after his stroke, was not capable of doing his duties. And his wife took over. And that's not what the Constitution says. But Edith Wilson was acting president. And when FDR was having his health problems, who was actually running the country? And after this passed, Bush the Elder spent a certain amount of time as acting president because Reagan had several surgeries. There have been a few times where presidents have had, a colonoscopy or whatever, and they're like, well, I'm not I'm not acting as president today because I'm doing another thing. I've got medical issues, and the vice president takes over until the president's back on his feet again. And this is a clear system of there's always somebody in charge. Whether it's, and when Reagan was shot, Alexander Haig tried to take over, which is, you will note, not what this provides for, because Alexander Haig was the Secretary of State. So he was in line for the presidency, but there was actually a Democrat between him and the presidency. It would have gone to Tip O'Neill before it went to Haig. But Haig was going around the White House saying, okay, I'm in charge now, and that's not how this works.
It really got into what the Bush first,
Yeah.
Then the Speaker, then the Senate President, then him. Like, I have even that. Like, I think Bush would be like, "Hello, President. This is my name."
First, it would have gone to Tip O'Neill, who was a Democrat from Massachusetts.
Was he the Speaker of the House?
He was the Speaker of the House. And then it would have gone to Warren Magnuson, who was also a Democrat from Minnesota. And only then would have gone to Haig. So, yeah. And that's ignoring Bush the Elder, who, again, was actually the person who would have been in charge. And to be fair, Reagan didn't actually transmit a written declaration on the grounds of he had just been shot. But you can do it if you're, if you're going in for elective surgery, which Reagan did a time or two, and he used his written declaration, and Bush the elder was in charge for 3 days while Reagan was recovering, and then Reagan sent a letter saying, okay, I'm better now, and he took over again. And it's a very sensible system to have in place if, you know that you're going to be out of commission for a day or two. Like I said, colonoscopy. Everybody of the age our president has been should be having a colonoscopy every 10 years, and they knock you out for that. At least they did when I had mine. So on the day when you're purging and on the day when you actually have it, maybe you shouldn't be running the country. So, it's a very practical system. And then this one is a little bit more applicable to Reagan for when he was shot, because whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive departments or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. So when Reagan got shot, Bush the elder could send the cabinet or whoever could send a letter to the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem saying, hey, the president can't do his job right now because he's in the ICU. And Bush the elder would take control until Reagan was back in the White House.
Or passed away and be officially president.
Right. And this one was under a great deal of discussion 6 or 7 years ago. And I suspect will continue to be under a great deal of discussion in the upcoming 4 years. Because this isn't just a life-threatening emergency. We're going to use Reagan as an example because everybody involved in that is dead, and it's a nice historical discussion that actually happened while this amendment was law. Reagan was officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's after leaving office. However, it is generally agreed that he was showing the symptoms before he left office. Therefore, if Bush the elder could have convinced a majority of the cabinet that Reagan was incapable of performing his duties as president, he could have had the power and duty of the office of acting president. And that would not have gotten him sworn into office. He still would have been vice president, because this is something that doesn't have to be permanent. Again, he had been able to do this when Reagan was shot because Reagan couldn't fill out the declaration himself because he was, on the operating table. And then he would have transferred power back to Reagan in a peaceful manner when Reagan was on his feet again. But theoretically, he could have done this over Reagan's declining mental state. He didn't. And there's a lot of discussion we can have about whether he should and how the country might have been different if he had. But it was certainly within his power as vice president to do this. Look, I didn't make that current events.
And the final one, the long one.
The final one is the long one. Thereafter, when the President transmits to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office unless the the Vice President and a majority of either the principal officers of the Executive Department or of such body as Congress may by law provide transmit within 4 days to the President pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Thereupon, Congress shall decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose if not in session. If the Congress, within 21 days after receipt of the latter written declaration, or if Congress is not in session within 21 days after Congress is required to assemble, determines by 2/3 vote of both houses that the President is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the Vice President shall continue to discharge the same as acting President, otherwise the President shall resume the powers and duties of his office.
Now, going into more modern terms. This was the thing they tried to do 4 years ago.
This was the thing that they were hoping that a lot of people were hoping that they would do. When it became clear to a lot of us that due to reasons of mental faculty, the President was not capable of performing the duties of office, a lot of us were hoping that Mike Pence would let the Senate and House of Representatives know that he did not believe the President was capable of performing his duties. And that would have thrown it into Congress to make that decision. I will say that I had no hope that Congress would do such a thing because Congress seems to have forgotten that they have backbones. But there would have been at least a 3-week period wherein there could have been, at least in theory, some damage mitigation. And I'm going to be real clear here that I don't think Mike Pence would have been a good president. And I think Mike Pence could have done some real harm as president. However, the one thing that I will give him is that he has respect for the rule of law. Mike Pence believes in the power of the Constitution. He sees it as a very different document than I do, but he believes in its authority and supremacy, and we saw him 4 years ago accepting its authority and supremacy. And that would have been different than what is in power now. It's 11:19 a.m. Pacific time on the 20th of January 2025 as I am talking. And if Mike Pence had taken this step, today could have been a very different day. I don't know how it would have been different. There's a lot to talk about there, but it could have been very different. And this exists because, frankly, I think this is about the Woodrow Wilson situation again, where it's entirely possible that they would have gotten a letter signed by Woodrow Wilson declaring that he was just fine and doing his job as president and he didn't know what everyone else was talking about. And then there would have been a real discussion on the state of his physical health and cognitive abilities. But this section has never been invoked. I don't know what it would take to get it invoked, and I don't know what would happen if it were, given the current makeup of Congress. Because this does require a supermajority, and I don't know if you can get a supermajority to agree. Obviously, senile man is senile.
So, did it say this is either majority or supermajority?
Supermajority. This is 2/3.
All right.
And I think that's reasonable. I think that makes it much less likely to be a political consideration. I think it's much more likely, in a case of a supermajority, for people to say, no, really look at what's happening.
Oh, really fast, off topic, follow up from earlier. They were talking about tomorrow that they do have the day off, but tomorrow they're talking about
Okay.
delayed for high schoolers tomorrow.
Oh, good. Ohio does have Martin Luther King Day for the schools. That's good to know. I was very upset about that. It's still below freezing here, and this is not a place where that happens very often.
Yeah, so they are planning, talking about having they're planning about a delay tomorrow, and since high schoolers don't get ticket, high schoolers don't have a bus to either, these parents either have to get them in school or they have to walk.
Oh, that's no good. Yeah, I didn't have a school bus when I was in high school, but that's because they just gave me an at the time RTD pass, which is currently Metro. It's the transit system in LA, and I could go wherever I wanted with my bus pass when I was in high school.
I lived 10 minutes away from high school, above my high school and middle school, so
I lived walking distance from my middle school, but my middle school is gonna take some repairing before people can attend classes there. I've seen the pictures. I've seen the aerial view, and oh boy.
Did it get burned?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Half the building is a shell at this point. They seem to have managed to prevent it from going into the southern wing. The building is an L shape. And
Yeah,
the auditorium and that area of the school is just gone.
Yeah, my middle school got torn down 10 years ago, not because it was old, not because of fire, but yeah. At this point, everything was a classroom now. One of the gyms they went so full that one of the gyms that we played dodgeball in was now 2 classrooms because there's running out of room.
Wow. Yeah, no, this is my junior high was built in the 1930s. It's a really cool looking old building, and a lot of it is just, it's gone. It's rubble. It's ashes and rubble. So much of my childhood.
Yeah, and my middle school used to be the high school, apparently, back before I was born. That was the high school.
Mine was always a junior high. It was actually named after the guy who developed the concept of junior high school.
Which I guess is why, for mine at least, why the middle school and the high school had the same mascot, because they were both.
Yeah. No, I was Charles W. Eliot Middle School Huskies in junior high, and I don't know what they're going to do. I really don't. We'll find out.
We were the Morton and the Vandalia Butler Aviators.
I was a mouse in kindergarten, and that school's gone. That school burned down. A cougar in 1st through 5th, a husky 6th through 8th, and then a Viking 9 through 12.
Yeah, I mentioned the 5th through 12th was aviators, but kindergarten through 4th, we were the Roadrunners.
Huh, that's an interesting mascot for an Ohio school.
In the middle of the library was, in my elementary school, our library was the center of the school. I think it was like a hub with the library in the middle, and
Huh.
the big Roadrunner in the middle, big Roadrunner on top of on the wall, in the middle of the library.
Well, my college was the Gooey Ducks, so
And our elementary school, our gym, our auditorium, cafeteria are all the same room.
yeah, my daughter's school is like that.
They put tables up for cafeteria. That we brought our, either we sat on the floor or we brought our own chairs for the auditoriums.
Wow.